At this time, I will call the meeting to order. And Scott has the flag behind him. So when Scott speaks, the picture will go back to him, I assume, and we will all stand and salute the flag, okay? All right, Scott, it's yours.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first order of business is to approve the agenda. And I think because it's kind of hard for me to see you wave or whatever you might do, I will just say your name, okay? And you can give me a yes or no to respond. So first I need a motion to approve the agenda. So give a call out if whoever, all right.
Second.
Paul, I see your hand up. John? Right, Paul and John. Please say yes if you approve the agenda. John?
Yes.
Linda? Linda?
Muted.
Linda, you must be muted. Okay.
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Izetta? That's unanimous. Thank you. The agenda is approved. Next order is of the budget presentation. Bob, you want to talk to us about the budget?
Here, I'm going to try to share a presentation here. Everybody able to see that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Super. Okay, well, I'm going to start out by saying this by far is the most complicated, in-depth process I've ever had to do looking at budget with the situation currently going on in our state. We've received some state aid estimates. And basically, in a nutshell, what they've done is our foundation aid, which is the majority of our aid, they are holding it flat at our current level. Usually there is an increase from year to year. Back in January, when the governor's proposal came out, there was an increase, and we initially expected to get even a larger increase than that. That is what usually happens every year. So currently, they are holding the foundation aid number flat at our current level. In addition, there is an unknown where, as the state goes through the year, there's a couple different times where they're going to evaluate their revenues, and there is the potential that they may do reductions throughout the year. But we are starting this process, and we're assuming a state, a flat foundation aid. We're going to talk a little bit about where we started in the process and some adjustments we've done as an administrative team. We've had to look at places where we can possibly reduce costs. I, of course, look for any potential revenues that we can gain. We'll talk about what the next steps are with some adjustments that we'll need to make to this information we're sharing tonight. We'll talk about the tax levy and give you an idea of what our next steps are, and we take questions. So we start the process with essentially a rollover budget. And that means all positions we currently have, we budget them for next year. There's minor changes in specific lines. Some we already talked about when we did some departments, like a specific expense that we would need to put in. But basically, starting out, initial concept of the budget, we were seeing an increase in the budget of just over $2.2 million from our current approved budget. These are some of the big nuts, the major categories that led to an increase of $2.2 million. So occupational education, that is our students that go to the Career and Tech BOE Center in Williamson, as well as we have a few students in the P-Tech program that you've heard about and in New Visions programs. We get billed for that based on the previous year's enrollment. So our budget for next year and what BOCES is going to charge us is not based on how many students we send next year. It's based on the number of students we have enrolled this year. And of course, this year we're paying a bill based on the number of students we had last year. Well, last year we had 38 students, and this year we have 55 students. So almost a 50% increase, which is a large increase in our budget when we're paying for those extra students. Healthcare, we've had a couple good years where our healthcare consortium has had very low costs compared to trend in the market. However, we are seeing across the board on our healthcare premiums an increase of 8%. Transportation, we actually did go through the transportation initial budget back in January. And one of our largest increases we have is the need to contract some transportation for our out-of-district runs, just due to not having enough drivers for us to be able to send our own buses to do those routes. I want to say that was somewhere in the neighborhood of $160,000. And additionally, we had talked about there is a lift that needs repair in the bus garage. It's totally a health and safety issue. It's not safe to use. So we've got about $35,000 that was budgeted to fix that lift. Retirement system costs, of course, for almost all of our employees, we do contribute a percent of salary into the teacher retirement system or the employee retirement system. Those rates of contribution have gone up from the current year. So we're seeing an increase there of almost $300,000. And our special education costs are up. Most of that is due to specific placements for students out of district in BOCES programs or private programs. Additionally, as we build next year's budget, we are budgeting for superintendent, but we've also got the deputy superintendent position, and that number is not a salary number, that is total cost for that position, includes all benefits associated with it, etc. When we looked at the revenue, I told you they were holding our foundation aid flat. And while that is the majority of our revenue, we do have some other small areas. But overall, our estimated revenues from our current budget that we built and approved to what we're estimating for next year, it's actually a small increase of a little over $100,000. One of the pieces that is dropping off is some of our building aid is going to be less than the current year. And specifically, we have a project that was approved in 2003, I believe it was. And I want to say the work was probably done around 2005. And after 15 years, that's how long they pay the aid back. This current year is the last year we received that. So that's about $150,000 that we were receiving this year that we won't receive next year because the state paid all the aid out of. So when you look at the increase that we talked about, taking us to expenses of just over $33.6 million, and with a revenue of 31.3, we started this process with a gap of just over $2.3 million.
So I'll share some of the information in terms of how we approach that gap. So as you imagine, that's pretty steep number. So what Bob and Megan and I did initially was to examine in the budget what are positions that are currently vacant, are those that will be vacant at the end of the year that may not be necessary for next year. And pulling all those together, that's a little over $830,000. We again examined the budget and looked at equipment that's not urgent for purchase. Bob mentioned fixing the lift. That would be an urgent piece, but us replacing a pickup truck, if the current truck is in good working order, can be held off. And so that's the kind of equipment that's in that $97,500. There's some administrative BOCE support pieces in terms of supporting the business office that we're going to forego, as well as some shared service pieces amounting to about $88,000. And then Bob scraped together some savings from various contingency accounts for energy and maintenance for $150,000. Now, these reductions were pieces that we felt comfortable, the three of us, removing from the budget, from the expense side, before we talked to administrators about that, because either we had talked to the administrators prior to that about those positions, or they were things that were pertinent, like the energy and maintenance, to Bob's area specifically. So what that did, after we did those initial reductions, the gap of 2.3 million plus down to 1.16 million. So then there are some potential additional adjustments that we could make, but we first wanted to be able to share those with you and talk to you and make sure you were aware of what we were looking at. I say adjustments because they aren't just reductions. The two reductions would be for us to avoid hiring that third SRO for next year. That's around 80,000, and then us delaying the additional co-curricular positions that Bob had shared with you earlier, about 34,000. The top bullet there is because that deputy superintendent piece is expenses for 1 year only, that we felt we were comfortable using fund balance from this year to offset that, because we wouldn't be then carrying an expense into next year that didn't have an offsetting revenue for it, that it doesn't in essence put the district behind the eight ball entering the 21-22 budget year. So those are adjustments that we want to make further, and then we would have a further an adjusted gap from there. So you can just see there those additional adjustments for 364,000. The updated gap is just a little under 800,000 heading into today.
So anytime we approach the budget process, those of you that have been around a number of years may have heard me talk about like a three-legged stool, and kind of need to look at each of three major areas when it comes to trying to balance the budget. One of those is you have to look at the expenditure side. You know, are there reductions we can do in the money going out the door? So we've talked about some of those already, and we'll continue to visit those. One of them is the use of fund balance. And when I say fund balance, that would be reserves included in that. So we've talked a little bit about how we would use some unappropriated fund balance and appropriate it for the first time in a number of years, as well as when we've gone through our funding and use of reserves policy, you know that there's a few that we rely on every year, and we would continue with that normal allotment. The third piece is the tax levy. That's our only other major revenue. And our tax levy limit, or what many people call the tax cap, going through the calculation for our district, we could increase the levy by just over $400,000. It's a 4.14% increase, and we would not need a supermajority vote, 60%, unless we went over that. to give you an idea of what the tax levy increases do for new revenues, every 1% that the tax levy increases would create $97,438 in new revenue.
Would you say
And all I've
that?
done, I'm sorry,
Would you say that number again, please?
$97,438 of new revenue for every 1% increase in the tax levy. And what I've listed below here in a grid is just for your reference, the past 5 years, what our tax levy limit has been, what we have proposed to the public and has been approved as a tax levy adjustment. And to the far right is what the tax rate ended up being per $1,000 once that new levy was applied in the new year. For demonstrating the impact that the levy does make on our current gap. Taking that updated gap after the changes Mr. Bishoping just talked about, it's at 797,000. If you took a 2% increase on the levy, that would generate a fresh $194,876 worth of new revenue, and our gap would still be at that point just over $600,000.
So our current work, because we're still in process with this, we engaged meeting with the principals and with Director of Special Education starting yesterday and then again today. We're reviewing our other options for expense reductions and are working up a priority list for that. And we expect to have an adjusted budget ready for you at different levels and what those levels mean in terms of reductions. Certainly we know that we realize that the board is not likely to want to exceed the cap, much less probably come close to that 4%. So we're going to be, we're expecting to give you levels of reductions all the way down to a 0% tax levy increase and what those mean. We expect to have those for next Wednesday's meeting. I would have to say, just commenting on that, you have an extraordinary set of administrators here. I've been impressed in terms of working with them and the collaboration they've shown with a difficult problem like this. Most or many times administrators get very territorial and start thinking, not mine, yours, in terms of offering up potential reductions. But I would have to say that this group of administrators has been very collaborative and has not been territorial in that sense. And that's certainly impressive. Time for a question. Sure.
Okay. I've heard the governor speak about his the development of his budget, and he might come back to different agencies and ask for money throughout the year. I lived through that once, and it was horrible to have to get money up in the middle of the year, or even he's talking about maybe 2 or 3 times during the year, depending on how much the economy comes back. Have you heard anything about that, Bob or Scott?
Yes, we have. That's kind of what I was referencing in the morning. Not the morning, I'm sorry. Long days.
Yeah.
In the beginning. They very clearly have said, we may reduce your aid during the year.
Yeah.
There's 3 different periods that they've identified where they are going to assess what the state's current revenues are, because they know they're going to have less revenue than normal. And based on what they assess, looking at those revenues, they will adjust state aid for school districts down.
John, to answer your question a little bit further, we expect that first period is April 1 to April 30. And so we would expect to know more about that before any kind of final budget approval needs to happen. So we would get an initial look at that, what that might be like. I think that part of that is dictated by this phase 4 federal assistance piece. And if there's funds for the states included in this next phase, that might offset the kind of reductions or needs that the state would have to pull from education.
Yes, in reality, they actually have already reduced our aid from flat by $357,000, but it's been supplemented back through the first federal CARES. So they've made it a wash. They're just saying that that $357,000 that they give us, or that they take back, they'll give us back with the federal one.
Okay, Bob? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It seems like our outplacement costs, if, even in the short time that I've been a board member, have dramatically increased. Is that accurate in the last 2 or 3 years?
Special education out of district costs?
Yes.
Yes, I would say that's accurate. It's been accurate most years that I put together budgets.
Is there I just wonder, I see the dollar amount that we spend. I mean, is there a more cost-effective way to do it in-house? I mean, it just seems like with the number of students that we have in outplacement, just for simple math, correct me if I'm wrong, divided by the students that we are catering to, it almost seems like we could save a little money by doing it in-house. Is that something you guys have considered, or?
So I can speak to that a little bit. Kelly and I actually were just speaking about that yesterday. One thing that we have to look at this point is space, as well as staffing for it. And so with being uncertain about space, as far as moving ahead next year, we didn't feel like it was a good time to try to transition any total classrooms back. It has to be new programs that house special class students because they're out, for a specific reason. So we would want to be very thoughtful about that, but it is something we've looked at. It just doesn't feel like next year would be a good year for that because of all the transitions that would probably take place with the middle school opening. But after that, the year after that, I think would be a good time to look at that.
I'd say a similar question with transportation. It seems like, once again, the inability to fill driver positions is really now, this year, costing us a lot. Is that number, I can only assume once again, that number is dramatically different than doing it in-house, and the number of drivers that we need. That if we had 10 more drivers, I mean, would we be saving a lot of money?
Yes.
As opposed to reversing it? Okay. Or maybe get creative with that at some point in the future as well. Because I just see those two things continuing to increase over the years unless we try to look at alternatives.
Right. And if we're able to put some new programs in place, and it's 1 or 2 less out of district placements we've got, then sure, we save that on the transportation side.
And thirdly, my only other thing that I have a question about the budget, our lease for the district office, I'm not sure how much that costs us a year. That seems like rough numbers, but going into the 2021 school year, we won't be leasing that building for the entire year, correct?
No, not for the entire year.
What's that lease off? Is that a month-to-month now, Bob, or is that?
It will be going into next year.
Should I ask another question? The cap is currently, what is our legal for our district?
Our tax cap,
Yes.
let me bring that back up for myself. I believe it's 4.14%.
Oh. That's quite a bit higher than it has been, isn't it? That's the legal
It's
max.
been around 4, give or take a little, yes, it's 4.14% or 403,000 change. Last year, it was 3.97%, the year before, 4.09. It's been upwards of 3.5% almost every year.
A portion of the outlays that we could, without sacrificing programs or materials for students, is there a portion of the outlays next year? Well, it's based on last year, so that's not going to change, even if we adjust it this year, correct? And what I was saying is if we ended up with a find for a few students where they get a similar
Yeah, the only program where it's based on the current year enrollment being next year's number is the career and tech programs, not the special education. Those are based on next year's program projections.
If we pull students out of the BOCES, then that will affect our revenues for the following.
Right.
So there is a price to pay.
That you pay the next year.
Right. And I understand that next year may be worse than this year from the state.
Yes, that's something I alluded to before. We do not anticipate this as being a one-year budget crisis. We do anticipate it being a couple of years at least. Because even if the state got through this year okay, and to restore us to what we normally would have gotten next year, they would have to do basically 2 or 3 years worth of increases. So we anticipate this will be at least a few years, probably similar to what we went through back when the state was doing the gap elimination adjustments, where they were taking money back when they had a financial crisis. And they did eventually get us back to levels where we were before, but it took them multiple years to achieve that.
I think we have to look very carefully at bringing back our students and providing our own programs. Because of the teacher costs, the benefits, all of that goes into it. It's not an easy thing. Although I recall when we did bring them back many years ago, it was extremely successful.
That's right around what, if I remember correctly, around 110,000 students average. Is that right, Bob?
To average it out per student, I couldn't tell you that. And there's a huge range on what student costs are. And I do want to clarify one other piece. While Cinda mentioned that when we don't spend BOCES money, that cuts into our revenue the following year, that actually doesn't pertain to our special education costs. Those are done separately. We don't receive BOCES aid on special education costs. We receive what's called high excess cost aid, private excess cost aid. Those are aids that you probably learned about in your financial class originally. They're aids based on what we spend for special education students, whether it's in district or out of district, in a BOCES program, in a private placement. That's a full different set of aid that we take care of.
Bob, is there any talk about reducing the title funds, federal funds at all?
Nothing significant that I've heard about at this point. I checked in with some of our sources, and we've seen small reductions pretty much every year. not significant, but put a few $1,000s here and there in some of our title grants. But we haven't heard anything to lead us to believe that there's going to be a major cut in those areas at this point.
What was the dollar amount again? If you don't have it readily available, fine. What was the dollar amount on replacing that lift?
35,000. Not a replacement, it's a repair.
Bob,
Yes.
I have a question. I was looking over some of the information that was put out earlier, and I thought there was mention of a reduction of the state's portion that they pay for special education services for 1 year only. Is that actually going to happen?
I haven't seen where it will be an impact that directly affects us that's gone through yet. No.
Okay. Okay.
And back to that lift for $35,000 for repair, that being a transportation expense should qualify for transportation aid in the following year.
We may need that.
Yes, we will.
They give a life expectancy of the lift that even after the repair. Just pick gold, isn't it, like 15 years or something?
I don't have that information.
Why do you ask? Is it, you think we should buy one?
No, I was just thinking if they're saying you're gonna have to replace it in 5 or 6 years, maybe there is a lease alternative just through the meantime where we don't have to spend 35,000. We can put a new one in there and then with an option to buy it again, that possibly makes sense. If it didn't make sense, I obviously would want to do it. But, a lot of the shop leasing programs right now have improved with the Fed's rate cuts, and I don't know how that affects the school this year, so I wouldn't know what programs that we have in place.
Yeah, we actually did, when we had lifts down, we had actually a couple of them down. The one we were able to repair quite small number. And in the meantime, though, Dan Friday had reached out and gotten prices on for us to basically rent a lift. Because we had to have that in place because we had to service buses. Fortunately, we didn't have to bring it in, but it was quite costly, and I apologize, I don't know that number off the top of my head. It was a few $1,000s per month.
Oh, wow. So it's almost the same amount you would pay to repair it.
Correct.
So Bob, your numbers for the teacher retirement and the service employee retirement are solid, right, for next year?
They're as solid as the information that we have currently. I base those off of actual positions and the percentage increase or the percentage of contributions that have been given to us by both of those systems.
And the same with the health insurance?
Health insurance, yes. Yes, we know that it's going to be 8% increase. The big variable when calculating health insurance is I can't tell you who next year is going to need or take health insurance, especially when people may come or go. We may have different employees. I anticipate we actually could see a slight increase just due to the fact that we probably have employees who may not be taking health insurance currently because they're on a spouse. Possibly that spouse may be getting laid off at this time. They may come and need to pick up insurance.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Okay, so next week on the 22nd, you're going to be bringing us different scenarios of tax levy and that sort of increase.
Correct.
Correct?
What we'll do, Lisetta, is we'll be sharing with you what are the roughly $400,000 worth of cuts that we expect to get down to that tax cap that you could go out at, and then levels of cuts to go below that all the way down to zero. We'll be sharing with you what we would be recommending as reductions to get to that point.
Would we expect BOCES to have any cuts in their budget? Or maybe BOCES, I mean.
They have a small decrease in their administrative from what they were originally projecting. I can't tell you for sure how that compares to the current number. But really, when we talk about the BOCES budget, it's just that administrative portion that there's much control over. All of our other BOCES costs are, they're based on who participates in them and what the costs are. So whenever they put together any of these cooperative services, whether it is a special ed program or whether it's the central business office, health and safety, they operate the program at the cost it is, and they basically split it up according to the proration of how each district uses it. And as you know, of course, at the end of the year, if there's surplus money left, returns do come back to school districts in the same proportion that they were spent. So the districts that spend more will get more of a refund.
So, John, since I have a little bit of background,
Right.
one of the things that happens in this kind of scenario, where you have a lot of districts getting reductions in aid and having probably gaps to close, that a lot of times BOCES services are those things that are used to close the gap. And so while they could, as a BOCES, project some reduction, a lot of times they're going to have cuts to their requests, which will automatically hike their costs. So they could try to cut, but they're going to have to do that anyway to recover from those reductions they're going to have to make.
Yeah. It never quite balances.
No.
Okay. Anything else at this time for the budget?
Or are we thinking about curriculum development reductions?
Megan?
I mean, that might be one option that we look at for next week.
Can you be more specific? Do you mean like professional development?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah, we're looking at all options.
yeah, okay. That's not good, but I know.
Yeah, we worked hard to build up our curriculum development period.
Yeah.
The one benefit, just as a piece along those lines that helps in terms of those reductions, we don't like to see declining enrollment, but in this case, declining enrollment has created the ability to do some right sizing to fit the population without harming the classroom in the sense of taking away things or increasing class size to an unreasonable level. So that's what the work we're trying to do, is to make those reductions with the least impact on the classroom, on the students, and of course on the staff as well.
When do we have to now present the budget and vote on the budget? What's the due date? Is that July? Or?
At this point, we don't have a date. We know it won't happen prior to June 1st, but we don't know when it will happen. Once that date is established by the state, we basically count backwards to identify the date that we'll need to do a budget hearing, the date that we'll need to mail information out, the date we'll need to do public notice. But we don't know until that date is determined.
So that gives obviously the district more time to do some planning.
Correct.
With real numbers.
Now, as close to real numbers as we'll have for now.
Might be staggering numbers. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, Bob. We knew it was going to be difficult news at best, so we'll see what happens next week on the 20th.
Thank you for all the administrative team for getting ulcers and headaches. And it's just started, hasn't it?
Actually, we're in the midst of it right now, John. The heavy lifting is well underway, but I'll certainly pass on those thank yous.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah.
All right, coming back to the agenda. The next item is the consent agenda. I need a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda. Linda and Isetta, okay. I thought, what is that little sound I'm hearing? And so okay, Linda and Isetta. Any discussion?
Yes. Can I say something now?
You may.
All right. We have several letters of resignation, retirement, and so on. And I think John O'Brien has been here a number of years and has done good service for us in the tech area. Abby Davies in the English in the middle school has done an excellent job. And I think she's going on the state ed department position. Well, anyhow, I had an interview with that one. And James Prentice coming back. So, I mean, that's good, solid. James is coming back to help us in the, if we already started again.
Okay.
So I just, the recognition, I don't know the librarian, but I'm sure she's done a wonderful job. The media specialist.
Would Scott or Megan like to say something about the high school principal?
Go ahead, Mike.
Sure, I can. You want me to go ahead, Scott?
Yes.
So we were very happy that we could continue our interview process, even amid being closed, and we were able to Zoom with Mr. Bradley. And we're very excited to welcome him on the team. I think he's watching tonight. So hi, Scott, if you're out there. We're really excited to welcome him to the team, and we think it's going to be a really good fit for the high school. We were happy to have teachers be able to be involved in that interview process, and we're just really looking forward to having him. And he's coming in at an interesting time for sure.
Yeah. No matter where you are this year, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I would just add that Scott comes highly recommended by some of my colleague superintendents that I spoke to. They speak very highly of him.
Oh, that's good news.
I think congratulations to our interim high school principal, Sandy George Lewis. I think she did an excellent job for us.
She did. Was Sandy, I just have a comment, was Sandy also going to stay to help a transition period for her? A week or so, I thought.
She's staying through until Scott gets started, yeah. So one of the things that happened was that the governor suspended the cap on amounts that those that are retired could exceed without a waiver and the cap during this period of time. And so that allowed her to stick around for a couple of extra weeks.
That's great.
That's great. Great.
Do you all understand the cooperative bid with the BOCES?
Just a quick overview of it.
Yeah.
That's an annual resolution which must be passed. It's actually for next school year, but it authorizes us to be part of that, the BOCES bid. So many times, we always look for the best price on things. We buy off state contract. But Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES also does multiple bids where they're able to go out, solicit pricing from many vendors in a lot of areas, things like cleaning supplies, gloves, batteries, and because of the large group that would be participating and buying through there, they're able to get very good pricing. So this just authorizes us to participate in their bids. We're not committed to buy off of that bid, but it gives us an option for a good price if it fits our needs. And that's done annually.
Okay, any other questions on the consent agenda? All right, then we will vote to approve. And once more, I will go down the list and give me a yes, please, or a no. This time I'll start from the other end. Izetta? There's a yes. Paul?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
John?
Yes,
All right, the consent agenda is passed. That completes all that we have on the agenda. However, we do need to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiations of one specific employee. So I need a motion to go into executive session. Tina and Jason, discussion? All in favor? Again, I'll go down the list, starting in the middle this time. Jason?
Yes.
This is an equal opportunity. Paul?
Yes.
Izetta? John?
yes.
Linda?
Yes.
And Tina?
Yeah.
Great. We're now going to move into executive session. To all of you at the public who were with us, we will not be doing any further business when we come out of the agenda, out of the executive session. So thank you very much for being with us. And we'll see you probably on the 22nd. So I'll leave it to the tech people to make those adjustments with Zoom to put us into executive session. Tell us when you're ready.